So good afternoon. Apologies for the slight delay in starting off this session, but we've got all our speakers, and it's. I promise it'll be interesting given the subject itself and the quality of the speakers on the dais. So we have Deb Malia. Deb Malia Sen is India lead for energy at WEF. Long years in the industry, including in the storage consulting space. So he brings that very keen eye for storage, and it'll be interesting to hear him out. Paul represents Energy Dome, global sales for Energy Dome. Informs me that he's signed the first contract in India, just chatting up. So it's an interesting technology, and particularly for non-mobile storage, and for electricity grid applications, it's a great technology to hear out on. And so we will listen to him on the promise of that as a substitute for lithium iron, which has obviously been the leading technology around the globe. Dr. Vijayashree Radhakrishnan represents Niti Aayog, and she'll be speaking about, when we talk about storage, obviously the role of critical minerals and supply chain comes very much into focus. So she will bring that perspective on how do we build security around supply chains, primarily, particularly related to critical minerals. Arpita brings a slightly different perspective. She'll speak about geothermal. So that is a technology that we've not really explored much in India. We have a few feasible sites, so we'll hear her out on the promise of that technology. So I won't take a lot of time. I'll just take a minute to introduce the subject. Obviously, when it comes to storage, it's here and now, in the sense that probably for the last 2 to 3 years, we have been harnessing the inherent flexibility of the grid to absorb renewables. And I'm talking about static storage here from a grid perspective. We are obviously running out of all the inherent flexibility that we had in terms of, let's say, flexing our thermal plants to the as much as we could. We now are, with the rapid amount of renewables being added and with the kind of ambition that we have of going or doubling our capacity to go up to 500 gigawatts by 2030, in terms of installed capacity of non-fossil fuels, there is no option but to start to add storage. And we're seeing a few projects come up, but it has to be intensified significantly. So in that context, therefore, this session is extremely important. And as I said at the beginning, where we are currently in terms of the global supply of storage, we do see an oversupply at this point in time. But taken in context, let's say 2030, we will, by any means of projections, you would require at least 4 times more storage capacity or supply to be provided. And so therefore, that puts things into context as to where storage stands at this point in time. Okay, I'll start with Dev Malia then, hand it over to him to walk us through his perspective on energy storage, and then we'll move on. Dev Malia, to you.
Right. Now, energy storage finds application across the grid as if we look into the generation network, that is transmission and distribution, as well as at the consumption end. Its use cases differ from application to application. If you look into ancillary market, it saves the grid in terms of secondary ancillary, third primary ancillary market. When we talk about renewables, and which we find its major applications of energy storage today is firming renewables or making renewables much more dependable as a resource than ever. Going into network and transmission, we know that renewable assets utilize transmission to a particular extent. It doesn't utilize the transmission network to the full extent, but for every renewable asset, we need to build a transmission network which is its entire capacity. So rather than that, we can have a transmission network with a battery or energy storage. Let's not term it as battery. Okay, we find application there. We find application in distribution transformers, where capex can be extended, or rather capex can be deferred by use of batteries, and of course in the consumption end and household categories we find its application. What we talk about storage, and it is but a family of multiple technologies. Often we find ourselves constricted only to lithium-ion batteries, but it's much more than lithium-ion batteries. It's pumped hydro, compressed air, lithium-ion flow batteries, sodium-ion thermal, high temperature, and others. Now see, every one of which is a family of its own, right? So that is storage. Now you can ask me, if there are so many technologies, do they not cannibalize each other? Okay, my answer is no. Every technology finds its sweet spot in the graph we show here. In terms of capacity, in terms of discharge time, we find pumped hydro as one technology which is not built often to small capacity. It is always for big capacity. Whereas for supercapacitors is something which is built for discharge at a very fast pace at a very small amount of time. So therefore, something which finds application very beautifully is you find the middle ones, the yellow ones, that lithium-ion battery, lead-acid batteries, flow batteries, and sodium-ion, which are equally applicable for short duration storage and long duration storage. Now, if we talk about storage, we often talk about matrices that define storage, and these matrices are, as you see on the slide, two becomes very important, which are round trip efficiency and depth of discharge, and so on and so forth. Of these, the most important both I told you. Now, the battery industry involves many actors, as he was pointing to. First, you have minerals, right? Of these, lithium, nickel, and manganese, and cobalt are critical minerals which are required to form the batteries. Now, if I look into the entire supply chain, it is mining, then processing, then component manufacturing, means your anodes and cathodes, then battery cell manufacturing, end life, and reuse or recycle. Of these, any guesses who is the biggest value creator? Of this, the biggest value creator is battery cell manufacturing, no doubts on that. But even before that, there is another actor which plays a critical role here, which brings in the biggest value amongst all: processing of raw materials. So that means if I have control over processing of these raw materials, I find it easy to have control over the entire value chain. Processing can give me control over component manufacturing, can give me control over battery cell manufacturing, etc. Now, when we talk about batteries in stationary storage, we need to understand what is a BESS. Is it just a cell? No. Many cells come together to form a module. Many modules come together to form a pack. Many packs come to a rack. One rack, multiple of these racks, which HVAC system, fire system, inverter, etc., comes in a container. Now, with this, outside this container, we have the transformer, you have the cables, and the metering point. That is what we talk about stationary storage. And this is where the cost is governed. Now, that single cell, the elementary product of a battery, controls 30% of this cost of the total battery BESS system. The cell cost is 30%. And that is where the cell becomes so important. Every time it goes, the cost of cell decrease or increase, the cost of BESS increases or decreases. Now, as we all know that the sector has gone through a lot, the capacity, the demand is expected to almost 3.7x times its present demand by 2030. Of this, of course, e-mobility finds the maximum application. 85% of global demand of batteries is governed just by e-mobility. The 15% is left over to stationary storage. But similarly, what has happened is supply has also increased. So much so that supply has overseeded demand multiple times. We expect supply to remain above demand in the near future. And that has given rise to this graph, which shows you that China alone today manufactures batteries 2.4x times global demand, right? So that is the amount of overcapacity that we have in the market today. The black dotted line is the actual demand. Now, why is this? You see this graph, and it shows you why it is. Because it is the value chain is dominated. The red part is China. Right from cell to cathode manufacturing to anode manufacturing to separator, everything he controls. Energy storage demand globally is found to be rising, and it can be around 2.2 terawatt hours by 2030, with China, UK, US, and India forming majority of the demand. Followed by chemistry. Here we have two chemistries which are expected to rule. One, LFP, second, NMC. NMC's percentage in the value chain slowly reduces, and LFP finds greater application here. The green part in this graph shows you LFP. Now, also talking to use case, we find that use case is majorly energy shifting or RE application. That will be the major application of storage in present times. What will be the duration of storage? Is it 2 hours, 4 hours, etc., etc., etc.? Question comes. At present, the duration is 2 to 4 hours. This will progressively increase because you know what? Storage is directly proportional to renewables in the grid. The amount of renewables in the grid, the amount of storage is required. So India, as of today, if you see, India has 13% renewable penetration. So virtually we don't need storage. What we can do is by virtual banking, we can gather it. But when this 13% goes to 40%, then the question completely changes. This slide shows you that energy storage use cases are different for different countries. For China, it's energy shifting. Now, you will see a very different graph for Australia and Germany, where the CNI segment or the residential segment is the major use case. Any guesses why? It is because the rooftop in these two countries, solar rooftop in these two countries, have actually taken over the market, and thereafter batteries have come. So basis of that, every country has its different use case as we talk. So the formula of there is no single formula of which applies to all get defined here. But beyond lithium ion, we have multiple chemistries which are showing interest here, like sodium ion, like flow batteries, etc. But what we forget in that is that lithium ion itself is innovating day in and day out. Cathode improvements, LFP is being improved by doping in manganese with it LMFP to make it closer to NMC. While the total example of cathode innovation has been going on, multiple innovation is applicable to anode also. What has been graphite is being changed to silicon. Lithium anodes are being talked about. So therefore, for chemistries to compete with lithium ion in this space becomes very difficult. Something sodium ion finds application, and it finds application majorly because sodium ion's dependence on critical raw minerals is less. Its cost can be less, but again, when you compete with someone who is improving every day, it becomes very difficult. And second, if you find application in e-mobility, right, then it becomes much more easier for you to find application in the grid. So therefore, coming to India, we find the demand is huge. Investment requirement is huge. Pumped hydro and batteries. Okay, we expect 47 gigawatts, 236 gigawatt hour of storage by 2031-32, along with pumped hydro of 26 gigawatt of 6 hours. Right? Investment requirement is huge, right? Policy and regulatory developments are key here. Demand side enablers as well as supply side. Demand side, government has been cognizant. It has introduced viability gap funding of 30% of your capex for every project of standalone battery storage. It has assigned 8 states to come out with tenders which will have viability gap funding. It has allowed for a 4% energy storage obligation on states by 2030. Multiple waivers, ISTS waivers are in place, as well as we have pumped hydro policy guidelines for tenders, including etc. Supply side, are we doing enough? We have a PLI scheme of 18,100 crores, out of which to build 50 gigawatt hour of capacity by 2025. Out of which 40 gigawatt has been awarded, 10 gigawatt hour is presently under discussion. We also have, if you have followed the budget this year, you must have heard about multiple waivers on supply chain of lithium and batteries that is being proposed. So supply and demand both have seen significant, help from government. Now, 2024 has been a catalyzing year for energy storage development in India. You see here, pumped hydro as well as BESS has been improving, so much so that 35 tenders has been issued of 69 gigawatt hours of ESS capacity, associated with 20 gigawatt of renewable capacity. The costs have fallen significantly. We have seen standalone batteries fall by 66% to come down to 2.36 rupees per kilowatt hour with VGF, and RE plus storage come down to 4.6 rupees per kilowatt hour. Now this is exciting, and cost will continue to decrease in the following years. But what we find is we will have to convert them into ground. Whatever is being awarded, that needs to convert to ground. So this is what I wanted to share, and open to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Devanlia. That was short and very, very sweeping in terms of the coverage. So thank you very much for doing that over a short period of time. We will change tracks to Paul. Paul, very interesting technology, as I said, and might address some of the issues that you raised, Devanlia. So let's hear into Paul.
Hi from me. I'm Paul Smith. I'm based in Milan, Italy, at our headquarters. Energy Dome is a company only 5 years old. We're coming to the market with what we're calling, and what is, and I will explain to you, a viable and the only real viable alternative to lithium and pumped hydro. And why do I say it's the only viable alternative? It is because it addresses the key constraints of those technologies. I won't go into details. You know the limitations of lithium and the geographical necessities of pumped hydro. And the other key components here, it's not that all technologies can succeed. We need to be cost competitive. So in order to be relevant and viable, we need to be cost competitive, we need to be scalable, and we need to be global. How does it work? It's very simple process, you'll be pleased to hear. It's something which relies entirely on existing supply chains, on existing industrial components.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to third edition of India Energy Week 2025. The show timings for today are from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. All visitors, exhibitors, and delegates are required to wear their badges at all times. Children below 18 years will not be allowed. Please take care of your belongings. Thank you.
The components are straight out of a very diverse, well-known industrial supply chain around the world. You can procure the components in India, Japan, the US, Europe, in all industrialized countries of the world. And this is how it works. What you see in front of you is a diagrammatic representation of the process. We have essentially a low pressure side and a high pressure side. And all we're doing is moving CO2 from the low pressure side to the high pressure side, in the same way that you move water from an upper reservoir to a lower reservoir in a pumped hydro. The dome is a very simple structure. It's an inflatable structure used for decades in the biogas industry. It's produced in India, by the way. The compressor is straight out of the oil and gas industry. It's an integrally geared compressor. We have thermal energy storage in there, which we've developed ourselves, but in essence, again, very simple, direct gas to solids heat transfer. And we're using water to condense the CO2 to liquid, and we're able, therefore, to store liquid above ground in standard steel pressure vessels. The whole plant is built out of carbon steel. And I'll just walk you through how the discharge works. In the discharging process, all we're doing is reversing the flow from the liquid pressurized side to the low pressure side, recovering the energy that we've captured, and going through a turbine. It has CO2 as the working fluid, but it's a standard, for all intents and purposes, steam turbine. It's exactly the same as a steam turbine. And that closes the loop. The process is very efficient. It's not as efficient as lithium ion. It's much more efficient than other mechanical processes. It's very close to pumped hydro in terms of performance, efficiencies, response times, all of those kind of things. And although only 5 years old, we've moved extremely quickly. We've demonstrated the technology already at megawatt scale, 2.5 megawatts. That's in operation for more than 2 years now. We've been very successful in attracting a stellar constellation of shareholders to join us and support us. And we started our construction on the first standard full-scale unit about 18 months ago. We're going into commissioning right now. That project has the support of the European Investment Bank and Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. And that's our own investment, by the way. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. We have an offtake agreement with ENGIE, one of the top 3 European utilities. We own and operate the plant. We provide availability guarantees, performance guarantees, and they decide when to dispatch the plant. They own the electrons. And that's the business model for our BOO business. You're welcome to buy one. You can buy one today as well. Let me just walk through now the configurations we have. The standard product, which is the one that you saw in construction there in Italy, is a 20 megawatt unit. It can be 8 hours, it can be 10 hours. It's a standard design. It's pre-engineered. The piping, the components, the vessels that we will be deploying, we have already deployed in Italy, are exactly the same in the second project that we signed a few months ago in the US with Alliant Energy in Wisconsin, and the same again for NTPC, where we're absolutely thrilled to say we'll be starting the first project commissioning the first project middle of next year. We just kicked off the project a couple of weeks ago. And that, by the way, will be already 80% made in India, for the first of a kind in India. The perspective from the cost point of view, because obviously we need to address, in order to be relevant, as I said, in order to be a viable alternative to this massive industry of lithium, we need to be at scale, and we're doing that by offering what we call a gigascale unit, that is a 1 gigawatt hour block of energy storage. It enables true round-the-clock, 24/7 renewable firm power production. And that's because our technology does not need to be symmetrical. I mean, a pumped hydro or an inverter-based system will always have the same number of hours of charging and discharging. Our machines are separate machines. We have a turbine and a compressor, a motor and a generator. So we're able to double the charging capacity, which allows us to charge the battery in 7-8 hours, and then discharge over 14 16 hours. So you have a true round-the-clock product. The cost level is extremely attractive. The LCOS is best in the industry by far, even where we are today comparing to this massive lithium industry with its cost reductions as we see them. I already hinted that this is a made in India project. Our ambition is actually to make India the platform for global exports. We're working hard on the supply chain. If anybody is involved in pressure vessels, those kind of products, please get in touch with us either through the site, find me after the call. Materials, it's standard steel. So it's already produced in India. Jindal, who was on the previous panel, are producing the kind of plate we need already, as is Tata. So we have a clear path. And what we're talking about a real made in India, sort of cradle to grave product here. This is not just something that's packaged and assembled here. So carbon steel, there's nothing in the process, nothing in the plant at all, which is new. The innovation is all about the process and the business models that we're bringing to the market here. And that's the summary, quickly. Costs, yes, it's all about the costs. We're super focused on costs. The efficiency is great, it's good enough. We're not focusing too much on driving that up. We're happy where that is in terms of competitiveness. Of course, there's no degradation, so the capacity is there for the lifetime of the project. It's a 30-year product, no degradation in capacity or efficiency, great local impact, sustainability. The steel you can recycle at the end of the life of the product, and therefore a low impact on the environment. So that's it. I've got 5 minutes to go. I'm going to give that to the rest of the panelists and hopefully to a few questions afterwards. Thanks a lot.
Paul, thank you. We'll come back to you in a while. I think there'll be some interesting questions, I'm sure. Over to Dr. Vijayashree to walk us through the critical minerals perspective.
Thank you. I feel really privileged to be kind of bringing in table a policy perspective where the whole mix is industry group, representative from World Economic Forum. So here, what I try to bring here is starting from what Mr. Sen has suggested. There are multiple actors in the value chain. And where you position yourself in the value chain is important, all for the policy making sense, for the industry, and for the economy as a whole. So here, as Mr. Sen rightly suggested, there is a case of Chinese dominance. So where is the possibility for India as an economy? So that is what my presentation is all about. So what to look forward in strategic critical mineral security? Are we looking forward for a China plus one scenario, or can it be an India plus many scenario? So starting with critical minerals, as you know, has extensive role, including the battery storage, including the renewable energy transition everywhere. But more than being a raw material, it is of strategic importance, basically because of its regional dominance. If you see, almost 60% of the whole global production of critical minerals or rare earth elements is concentrated in China. And most alarmingly, 90% of the processing capacity or the refining capacity is also with one country. So be it any country, if what happens is, if the production capacity and the refining capacity is globally concentrated in one particular segment, any vulnerability in that particular value chain has ripple effects all over the economy, all over the globe in fact. So that is when the whole globe, especially the global north, decided to de-risk from China. That is where the case of a China plus one scenario came. Now, who is going to be the plus one is debatable. The global north is seeking for alternatives. The global south is trying to become the alternative. So that is the existing case. And even for India, this is not a simple matter. India is heavily dependent on Chinese imports when it comes to the rare earth elements. So de-risking from China or being the plus one in the China plus strategy is important for India as an economy, and we need to have more strategical pertinence in becoming an India plus many scenario wherein we are positioning ourselves as the prominent player. So how can it be done? Instead of focusing on a product-based comparative advantage, if we are moving to a component-based advantage, there is a chance for leveraging. Similarly, if we are able to have strategic trade partnerships, if we are open to more open ecosystems like CPTPP, RCEP, then we are having more potential for an enhanced global presence, I would say. And before considering about where is our comparative advantage, finding out what is our advantage and what is our relative advantage from a global sense is very much important for industry as well as policy making. So here I have compared the peer countries. There is no question of comparing India and China, where Indian imports are heavily coming from Chinese economy. So what I have done is basically compared three countries: Vietnam, Thailand and Malaysia. If you see in this particular case of having an India plus many scenario, Malaysia becomes a significant competitor. I'm considering the current status of economy. If you see, they have significant mineral deposits of tin, copper and rare earths, which we also have, but the difference is that Malaysia is a key exporter in the current status. So whereas we are import dependent. So that is an area where we pinch, and that is an area where industry and the policy making can go hand in hand. Similarly, Malaysia is a country having moderate dependence on China, especially for critical rare earths. And similarly, it is a country with stronger infrastructure and established export chains, which is something which can be emulated to Indian scenario as well. However, what gives India the advantage is its sheer scale. India has a huge potential in terms of economies of scale, in terms of a vibrant demographic dividend. Adequately skilled and adequately incentivized, this can create an immense leverage. So there are two-pronged how to tap into the India plus many scenario. So there is a two-pronged strategy. One is the creating domestic capacities, whereas having adequate international partnerships. So should India focus on mining? Yes, we have to. Because, as I mentioned, because of its immense potential for growth and the demographic dividend. In fact, the government of India has already taken bold steps by listing 33 critical minerals and facilitating PLI schemes for critical mineral exploration. However, a major issue, if you see in recent times, is that when we had auctions for Jammu and Kashmir mines, a large chunk of the mines, the auctions didn't go through. The reason being the overvaluation of the mining contracts. So that is where, yes, it is a potential industry, but that is where the policy and the industry has to go hand in hand. And secondly, it is regarding the international ecosystem. India lacks fiscal capacity as of now to go in for a large-scale mining exploration. If you see in South Africa, which is a heaven for critical minerals, most of the large-scale mining companies are owned by Chinese companies. Mines are owned by Chinese companies. But we, in this present state, are not having so much of a susceptibility to adapt into it. So what we can do is, we can partner with mid-sized and junior miners. For instance, the lithium procurement efforts in Argentina by the India is an important case. Similarly, starting from G20, we have been trying to build stronger ties with South Africa, which is a great effort from policy making sense. And as everyone knows, financing becomes a crucial part in the case of critical minerals, which seeks for most investment-friendly ecosystem and having fruitful partnerships, particularly with the strong countries like Australia and Germany, or even we can look forward for being part of the MSP channel, the Strategic Mineral Security Partnership channel. And most importantly, processing becomes an area where we can capture the capture a significant chunk of the value chain, and we are able to do it. And why is because PLIs, as rightly pointed out in the union budget, PLIs have a proven record of how interventions in individual components can have an impact over the larger ecosystem. We had PLIs for semiconductors, we had PLIs for the electronics industry, which had a ripple effect on the net exports on mobile phones. Similarly, if we are having targeted interventions in the rare earth sector, which is in the pipeline, it will have a larger reflection on the larger system. Now, what can be done is securing domestic extraction, strengthening processing capabilities, and boosting recycling and circular economy. And most importantly, it's a personal opinion, but expanding global partnerships and strategic partnerships is the one way to get through or to navigate in a difficult circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vijayashree. We'll move on to Arpita Das, who will walk us through geothermal, right? As a
Very good afternoon to everybody. All my co-speakers have left me ample of time to talk about my topic. Taking a reroute, let's just discuss about the geothermal energy prospectivity, a case study from Krishna Godavari Basin, India. Before we start, I would like to touch upon a brief overview about what geothermal is, why do we need that, and how are we doing it. So the three questions, what, why, and how. We'll briefly touch upon that. Moving forward, this is the contents page where we are mostly going to touch upon the topics, and I'll go along as we are going forward with the presentation. Now, what is geothermal energy? Geothermal is nothing but the extraction of the heat that is present inside the earth and harnessing it and generating energy from that. The heat, we are extracting the heat from the subsurface that is present, because as we know that the temperatures can go up to as much as 6,000 degrees centigrade, and it's been replenished. There is no shortage of heat energy inside the surface of the earth, and getting that heat on the surface and generating energy from that is geothermal basically. First, we know the source. Second, where do we get it? We can't, it's obvious that every locale is not possible for geothermal. It's mostly found at the plate boundaries, because the plate boundaries are mostly either converging towards each other, diverging, or moving past each other, causing friction, which is basically generating more and more heat, which we can get it on the surface. Now we have the source, we know where the geothermal heat is, but how do we get that? Now for that getting, what we need is basically the water that is available on the surface, that is the rainwater or snow melt, whatever we have, that seeps underground and it reaches the place where the heat is present. The water extracts the heat from there, we get the water up to the surface, and then what we do is we extract that heat and send the water back to the surface, and there are several ways which we'll discuss in the furthermore slides. Now, a brief classification, initially it was just based on if the temperature is higher at a certain place, then it's a good geothermal source, but really that's not the case, because there are several other factors like what is the depth, what is the enthalpy, and there are several other factors which governs what type of geothermal resource or how good it is. And I will just briefly touch upon 3 types of resources, as in where are the locales where we can find it. One that I spoke about previously is the one where it is available at a free flow, that is basically we have thermal springs present. So there's a porous media, the water seeps in, the temperature and the heat is gathered there, and the water comes out through again another porous media, and we get it on the surface. Whereas there are places where the heat or the water or the fluid is trapped deep inside the subsurface in the sedimentary basins, which are of around 2 or 5 kilometers depth. There it's difficult to get it naturally, and we need to extract it from the subsurface, and we need to put in some mechanism to do that. And the third are the hot resources. So there are rocks which have high radioactive potential. So there are radioactive minerals, they are generating heat, but there is no fluid to trap the heat or anything. It's the rocks with very less permeability, that is the like free flow of the medium is not very much available there. So in that case, what we can do is take some water, we put it inside through a well, which is the injection well. We again trap the heat through the subsurface in that region, and we again get it through a production well and extract the heat out of it. This is a very brief overview about the resources that are present and the types that is available. Now that we have got the heat up to the surface, what do we do with that? We need to convert it into energy. So just a brief overview about the geothermal power plants that we generally use to do it. Initially, like there are different source of medium or fluid states in which the heat is trapped. In case if there's a steam, we can just directly get the steam up to the surface and rotate a turbine and generate electricity. Whereas there are places where there is water, like hot water or high temperature water present, in which we need to get it to the surface and transfer it to a vapor and generate electricity. And the third is because we cannot expect all the waters to have similar kind of temperatures. Some will have higher and some will have lower. We have to work our way through it to maximum gain the potential and extract the energy from it. So if the temperatures of those areas where it's a bit less, like less than 180, 150 degrees, what we do is we get the water up to the surface, we try to heat another like fluid which has a lower boiling point. So in that case, it takes that fluid gets heated up, and then it generates the electricity in order to extract the energy from it. This is in a very industry point of view, that these are the energy generating. Other than that also, geothermal is very well used in our day-to-day lives, like thermal hot springs is one of the example, or normal heating and cooling, circulation. These are also some of the benefits that we get from the geothermal resources. Now moving forward, we answered what is geothermal. Now why do we need it? It's the hour of the need basically. As we can see that the energy consumption which is there, it's basically the graph shows the increase in percentage of energy consumption compared to the previous year. We never see a negative going down. There is never a less energy consumption in the next year compared to the previous year. If we compare COVID, in 2021, there was a drop in the graph. Otherwise, we always are in more and more of need of energy. Similarly, if we see now what are the sources from we are getting the energy, initially it was mostly the traditional biomass, coal and oil, but slowly with the growing years, the renewables are taking also a part in that, and geothermal is also one of them, and that is why we need this for creating a sustainable environment, in short. Now, just a minute. Yeah, so that is why we need it. Now how we are doing it, how are we extracting the geothermal, or what are the statistics in the world point of view, we'll go through it. Is as we see through, So as we see that throughout the years, the capacity, like the installed capacity in other countries have been increased at a good rate for the geothermal extraction. Also the generation of the electricity from these capacities have also been increased throughout the years. As we can see that US has the highest capacity currently producing geothermal power, as well as we have industries like countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Turkey, which also use the geothermal power to produce the energy and utilize that. It must be knowing that Iceland, more than 90% of its heating and cooling is done through geothermal in Iceland. Also around 15% of its electricity requirements are met through geothermal in Iceland, Philippines and Italy as well. So moving forward, as we see the geothermal world view, what are the scenarios currently in India? We'll move forward with that. Now, just a minute, the slide is a bit. Yeah. So, coming to the geothermal provinces in India, now India currently has targeted, has set a target of 500 gigawatts of non-fuel based energy by 2030, and to add on to that, geothermal has also been one of them. Now, GSI with the help of Ministry of New and Renewable Energies had estimated a 10 gigawatt potential of geothermal energy in India. Also, as we can see in this map, so as we said that heat is a very prime factor for geothermal energy. So as we can see that the Indian map, wherever the plate tectonics or the plate movements are dominant, there the heat flow is higher. Wherever the heat flow is higher, that are the potential zones that we can target for geothermal. Currently, ONGC has been working in Puga, Ladakh, Tapovan and Marugunu in Telangana. So, 1 megawatt power plant has been planned by ONGC in Puga Valley, and in Maruguru also a 20 kilowatt successful power plant has been set up, and also MOU has been signed with Iceland Geosurvey to exactly measure the potential of the geothermal capacity to bring it in actual proper levels, like how to get the exact numbers so that we can move forward with it in a practical approach. Now moving forward also, these are the places where there are higher temperatures and higher at shallower depths. Also ONGC and Iceland Geosurvey has taken up projects where they are going to find out the prospective locales in India where geothermal is possible. In that comes the KG Basin. Now I'll just shift to the KG Basin with a brief overview of that. Yeah, so KG Basin, as we can see, I'll just put it in the India map. It's situated in the peninsular India. It's a pericratonic basin, and it has, it's very well known for its hydrocarbon potential from very old age of Permian to Pliocene as well. Now to put it on the geothermal map of India, I have taken an attempt to bring out the prospectivity of the basin in by collaborating data and interpreting the same. Now, as we can see that this part of the basin, we already have Godavari Basin where the Manuguru field is situated, and for KG mostly we see that the heat values range between 30 to 102, which is considered a medium category resource. Now moving forward, this is the methodology that we had taken out. Now KG has around 1100 of drilled wells, so that we have drilled in the past for hydrocarbon exploration. Now taking those well data that are like available in abundance, we have taken out the temperature data from the drilled wells that we have available, and those temperature data have been taken up with respect to depths, and temperature gradients have been prepared. So temperature gradient is basically the change in temperature as we go through a certain depth. Now higher the gradient, it's understood that it will be more beneficial for geothermal. So what we have done is, this is the area that we have been working, and this is the whole place where we have collected around 1000 wells data and accumulated it and prepared the temperature gradient graphs that we can show here. I've shown some representatives from different areas. We can see the temperature gradient varies from 3.5 to 4.5 at maximum of 4.9 to 5 degrees per 100 meters have gone. Now moving forward, these are the depth maps that we have prepared. Now besides temperature, depth is also an important factor, because we need to, the more advantageous the shallower depths may, if we get higher temperatures, it's more advantageous for us. That's why what we have done is at every 500 levels, we have prepared different temperature maps throughout the KG basin to see the temperature variation throughout the basin. Now, I'll just touch upon the highlights that we have figured out in this whole study that we carried out. Now, if we see this area, I'm pointing out in the laser, that this area shows a reddish patch, means as we can see the color graph, that it has shown higher temperatures at both 1500 as well as 2000 meter levels. We also have temperatures beyond that. This is the offshore area. That's why, because of the sediment water less thickness column, as water depth is higher, so we have lesser temperatures present here. Now, similarly, as we go deeper, I highlighted this area previously, which is again present here, which has a higher temperature area, again like higher temperatures in the deeper depths. Now, as we can see, the the pink figure, it's basically the presence of the basement. As we were talking about earlier, that there are rocks which have high radioactive potential, but they don't have fluids present in it. These are the basement rocks that we have that are present, which actually have higher heat conductivity and higher radioactive level, and this can act upon for geothermal. I'll discuss about that later. So, as I can see, the higher temperature areas have these basements encountering at shallower depths. As we move forward at 3500 and 4000, we have obviously, as we go deeper, the temperatures are higher, but again corresponding to this area, as we are mostly restricted ourselves to the northwestern part area, where we can see a higher trend in temperatures compared to the rest of the basin part, right? So, now we have come to the highest 45 Henry Hut, and we can see that the temperature has gone up to 210 degree centigrade, which is up around 4.5 degree centigrade per 100 meters of temperature gradient. Now, what we tried to do was, we have taken up the temperatures which have more than 4.2 gradient at all depth levels, and we have overlapped those areas here to understand that in which places we have that consistent higher temperature through all the depths, in order to reanalyze and get the knowledge in depth that what can we do there, because we are getting higher temperatures at shallower as well as at deeper depths also. So, this is the area basically where we are getting the higher temperatures at all depths, as well as this area where we have higher temperatures at a slightly deeper depth. Now, all of this to come to the conclusion about the practical point of view is, I had spoken about the enhanced geothermal system, where we have the rocks which have the heat but no fluid. So, in this area, those rocks are present at a very shallower depth of around 2500 meters. Now, if we drill a well and fracture those rocks and pass a fluid through it, preferably water, or nowadays supercritical carbon dioxide has also been taken up to take it as a measure of as CCUS also, which will generate help in generating geothermal energy. So, these areas we can inject the fluid, it will trap up the heat, and then we can get it to the surface and use that heat for either heating or cooling or power generation as well. Also, the deeper areas where there are higher temperatures, it's a bit tricky because it's high pressure and high temperature. So, dealing with those areas also gets a bit tricky while drilling a well, because there are certain complications, but we can look forward to those areas as well. In combined, our work was mainly limited to mapping and understanding the area and finding out the prospectivity, but the enhanced geothermal system or the supercritical CO2, if we can use, that was more of a theoretical approach that we have taken up right now. We need to see the practicality and economic viability of it for sure. This is basically the points that I summarized throughout the slides to understand the areas which are important, the processes which can use to extract the areas, and what are the things that we have to see in future for us to actually monetize this whole thing and make an mark in the map of geothermal industry for India as well as KG Basin. These are the references. Thank you everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arpita. With the massive requirements that we have from a net zero perspective, I think all forms of renewables will come into play, and this is one area obviously which needs to be also looked at and tapped into. Maybe I just have one or two questions and we'll wrap up. Maybe Demalia, to you first. Um, Now, you alluded to the fact that the stationary mobile stationary storage segment has benefited significantly from the developments in the mobile storage segment. But one of the things which is a little concerning over the last couple of years is the pullback on EV deployment, particularly in the Western world, Europe and US included. Do you see that as a matter of concern? Is that something that will ease up over the next couple of years? How do you see this playing out?
Thank you. I will give you some data points to answer this. So from 2020 to 2021, EV industry grew by 111%. Okay? Now seeing that growth, mining industry, processing industry, manufacturing industry was all upbeat, and they started announcing new mining facilities, new manufacturing facilities everywhere. Okay? 2022 to 2023, EV industry grew by 66%. Now, if you look into the number 66, it's a great number, but 111 to 66 was not good. 23 to 24, it grew by 32%. 24 to 25, so 24, it grew by 22%. Okay? So what has happened is, while EV industry grew, it did not grow up to the expectations. And expectations hugely from the mining sector, from the manufacturing sector. And that has resulted in what I showed in the graph, that China alone is producing 2.3 times global demand. Imagine. Right, so yes, while the EV industry has been a dampener, but the stationary storage, as you rightly said, is benefiting from it. The demand of stationary storage alone grew by 211% in the last 1 year from from the sector. So yes, it has. And that's why the overcapacity is not going away. And you hear every day that manufacturing plants have been either deferred or cancelled everywhere. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Paul, if I can come to you. One of the things which I found exciting in the technology that you showed is, of course, that it is still making use of rotating machines, and possibly there's no inverters. So there is an additional gain in terms of providing inertia to the grid. Is that conclusion correct? Could you walk us through?
Absolutely. Absolutely, spot on. By definition, these rotating machines have inertia. They're heavy machines rotating quickly. In fact, not only that, but we have the capability to configure the plant in the form of, in a mode of synchronous condenser. So, I mean, basically what we can do with the generator is, independently of the energy storage functions, even in standby mode, have the generator connected to the grid with a gearbox, with a clutch, disconnected from the turbine, and that will operate as a synchronous condenser, providing inertia, reactive power, all of that good stuff. And the compressor side is even heavier, actually. It's very interesting. The short circuit level on the compressor side is incredibly high, and the grid operators love it. You know, we actually have power systems models that we can provide to the transmission systems operators. If you want, get in touch. You can see how it performs on the network. I mean, this is just a game changer. It's something completely different to what lithium does. Lithium is actually causing a problem on the network. It's solving the renewables penetration issue. It's helping in that respect, but it introduces new challenges into grids and systems operations. So we have the ability to solve two problems with one technology here.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. The last one, maybe Dr. Vijayashree. I heard you say that I won't draw you out on a policy that you may be working on, but Do you see a PLI for critical minerals coming through? Is that something that is in the works?
It is a desirable policy change, but whether it's in the pipeline or so, we have to still await. That's it.
Thank you. I think that's it. We will not have time to take audience questions. I'll have to hand it back to the organizers. I hope you found it interesting. This was, to me, a very, very interesting session. Thank you.